The American space program. For 25 years and 55 manned flights, it seemed as close to perfect as mankind can get. January 28, 1986. 7 astronauts, including New Hampshire school teacher Krista McAuliffe, board the Space Shuttle Challenger and rocket toward the heavens. School children across America tune in to watch. Before the nation's eyes, it happens. The crew is killed, the spacecraft destroyed. It was the worst disaster in the history of spaceflight. This is a story of the Challenger disaster, of the 7 heroes who died and the nation that mourned them, of the investigation that shook a proud organization to its roots and revealed the flaws that led to tragedy. And finally, it is a story of a dream reborn, America's triumphant return to space. Through it all, ABC News was there. Watch now the original ABC News broadcasts of a great TV news story, from disaster to discovery, the Challenger explosion and the rebirth of America's space shuttle. From ABC News, great TV news stories with Peter Jennings, David Brinkley, Sam Donaldson, Steve Bell, Lynn Scher, and the worldwide resources of ABC News.
It's long been a goal of our space shuttle, the program to someday carry citizen passengers into space. Until now, we hadn't decided who the first citizen passenger would be. But today I'm directing NASA to begin a search in all of our elementary and secondary schools and to choose as the first citizen passenger in the history of our space program, one of America's finest, a teacher.
NASA has chosen the first teacher to go into space. She comes from New Hampshire, and ABC's Steve Shepard was at the White House when the announcement was made today.
And the winner, the teacher who will be going into space, Krista McAuliffe. Is that you?
It was. But when the 36-year-old Concord, New Hampshire high school teacher heard Vice President Bush call her name, she didn't feel much like herself.
It's not often that a teacher is at a loss for words. I know my students wouldn't think so.
The words she finally found were praise for the 9 other finalists she beat out in the competition to become the first American teacher in space.
When that shuttle goes, there might be one body. But there's going to be 10 souls that I'm taking with me. Thank you.
That's great.
Krista McAuliffe's joy was celebrated by her husband and 2 children back in Concord. Her 8-year-old son, Scott, seemed especially pleased.
But she's going to bring one of my frogs up. So I can at least tell my friends that my frog went up.
Ignition and liftoff.
After months of preparation, Krista McAuliffe will board the Space Shuttle Challenger next January 22nd and lift off into Earth orbit, something she's dreamed about since youth.
When she left her classroom behind for a semester of space training, 37-year-old Krista McAuliffe temporarily traded 12 years of teaching for a new kind of learning. Listen to her description of the airplane ride that simulates zero gravity.
As you peak that parabola at the top, you have about 20 or 30 seconds of weightlessness, and all of a sudden, just like Peter Pan, you start flying up, and it was just unbelievable.
That's the enthusiasm that's made her a favorite of students at Concord High School in New Hampshire. This is where the Boston-born social studies teacher lives with her husband and 2 children, and where she put together her winning lesson plan.
It's clear from her NASA application that Krista McAuliffe took special care to relate her classes here at Concord High School to what she calls the real world. Her philosophy of teaching, she wrote, stresses community activities. The economics class finds out how local construction projects impact the city. Law classes visit the local courts.
She can take very complex concepts and simplify them, but not water them down, and she makes all her students understand things, but in an interesting manner.
She was explaining like the assembly line process, and she went into this story about when she used to package Twinkies on an assembly line. And I mean, I just laughed so hard, but I'm not gonna forget it.
That's also what helped her application stand out among the 11,000 NASA received. When she reported to NASA's Johnson Space Center in Houston, she was poked and prodded and outfitted and observed.
She's a sort of a risk taker. She does the unusual, the way she runs a class, and she's not afraid of things. She lives life. She's not afraid of it.
Teachers are always prepared.
And while she taught history and economics, her students figured out there was something else on her mind, too.
Even on the quizzes, she'd throw in an extra credit quiz about what are the 5 names of the space shuttle. So we always knew her interest in space was high.
McAuliffe's crewmates have graded her well, acknowledging theirs will always be known as the teacher mission. And she hopes the lesson about space travel on the shuttle will not just be for youngsters.
People actually, adults have asked me, how many stops is that shuttle going to make? Bring me back a moon rock.
It's the kind of misinformation Krista McAuliffe wants to correct. And it's why the high school teacher from New England won't be watching the next space shuttle launch. She'll be on it. Lynn Scher, ABC News, Concord, New Hampshire.
Good morning, everyone. There appears to have been a very serious accident involving the Space Shuttle Challenger. The launch took place just a few moments ago from Cape Canaveral. It had been delayed 4 times. It appeared to be a good launch at the point of departure from the pad at Cape Canaveral. There had been, as we said, previous delays of 4 different attempts. This was the 4th one. It had been delayed a couple of hours by ice, by a faulty gauge. Then it appeared everything was good for a launch, but shortly after the launch, there was an explosion. We have a tape now, a replay of the launch of the Shuttle Challenger this morning. This was shortly after the launch, which took place shortly after 11:30 Eastern Time. It appeared that all was going well until there was a massive explosion in space. NASA has confirmed that there was an explosion with the capsule, the shuttle itself. Aboard this flight, of course, the first teacher in space, Krista McAuliffe from New Hampshire. Also aboard the flight, pilot Mike Smith, Commander Dick Scobie, Judy Resnick, and there it is. There you see that massive explosion in space, obviously a very serious accident. Let's listen to Mission Control. No communication at this precise point. They have assured us that all rescue procedures have been put into effect, but line of sight, it certainly appears to be a most serious accident, unlike anything else in the shuttle program. John Quinones at Cape Canaveral.
Here looking very carefully at the situation.
John, what do we know?
Well, Steve, no one is saying anything here other than there has been an explosion. Contingency procedures are underway. Recovery forces have been sent out into the field. Preliminary word is that the remains of the vehicle have landed somewhere in the ocean. We don't know how far, but there's been no explanation as to what happened about 90 seconds after liftoff, and it was a picture-perfect liftoff. Suddenly, as you saw it there, it exploded. There is no word on what happened.
The president is concerned. He is saddened. He is very anxious to have more information on it. At the moment, as I say, we're learning most of our information from what the public is getting.
With me now, Peter Jennings, who has been at the White House this morning and is here in Washington with me. Peter, you've been following this shuttle program like the rest of us. Just a tremendous shock so shortly after liftoff.
In fact, Steve, I must tell you heard Larry speak, sir. I was actually sitting in the White House with a group of other correspondents waiting for the president to come in and talk to us about the State of the Union message, and Don Regan, the chief of staff, was handed a note and said to us simply, the space shuttle has exploded, details to follow, at which point I fled the room, and I sympathize with Mr. Speaks at this point because he indeed is getting virtually all of his information at this point from us.
They gathered for what turned out to be their last meal at 6:48 this morning, the ceremonial breakfast. For months, they had trained together. Astronaut Ellison Onizuka from Hawaii, The star of this mission, New Hampshire schoolteacher Krista McAuliffe, pilot Michael Smith, mission commander Dick Scobie, astronauts Judith Resnick and Ronald McNair, and payload specialist Gregory Jarvis. After 3 days of delays, they appeared tired but quickly rejuvenated by applause as they headed for the launch pad.
Scobie, followed by mission specialist Judy Resnick, Ron McNair, and pilot Mike Smith, followed by Krista McAuliffe, teacher in space, and Ellison Onizuka, and payload specialist Greg Jarvis.
Final preparations before liftoff. The ground crew gives McAuliffe an apple for the teacher, and wishes of good luck. Initially, liftoff was scheduled for 9:38 this morning, but again there were problems. A hard freeze overnight left ice on the launch pad, a 2-hour delay, and then NASA discovers a faulty fire detector on board the shuttle, another hour's delay while it's replaced. Finally, the liftoff was set for 11:38. A crowd of some 500 spectators, including 18 visiting school children from McAuliffe's hometown of Concord, New Hampshire, waited anxiously and then counted down. The liftoff appeared flawless. The spectators, including Krista McAuliffe's parents, Grace and Edward Corrigan, watched proudly through tears of joy. 65 seconds into flight, NASA Control orders Commander Scobie to go to full power.
Challenger, go at throttle up. Challenger, go at throttle up.
Suddenly, an explosion.
Flight controllers here looking very carefully at the situation. Obviously a major malfunction.
NASA loses all communication with Challenger, but the crowd still does not realize that something's gone wrong. Within seconds, Challenger disintegrates.
We have a report from the flight dynamics officer that the vehicle has exploded.
For the spectators and Krista McAuliffe's parents, joy turns to confusion, worry, and a realization of tragedy. The $1.2 billion spaceship, its 7 crew members, and their satellite payload disappear.
I thought the flight was going fine. And then I heard them say major malfunction. And then the person beside me said it's exploded. And it was, I couldn't speak. It was...
Within minutes, emergency rescue teams parachuted in, converging on a search area 18 miles east of Cape Canaveral.
Debris continued to fall for 50 minutes and more, and obviously you can't send aircraft and ships into an area where debris is falling, where they themselves may be endangered.
Late this afternoon, after 6 hours of searching, NASA reports they found no survivors.
These searches have not revealed any evidence that the crew of Challenger survived.
Tonight, NASA and Cape Canaveral are in mourning.
It was going to be a very big day in Krista McAuliffe's hometown of Concord, New Hampshire, and especially at the high school where she taught. ABC's Jay Shadler was there.
Krista McAuliffe's students and friends at Concord High School were ready to watch a dream come true this morning. Instead, they became witnesses to a nightmare.
2, 1, and liftoff.
In the moments after the launch, their celebrations drowned out the first news of the tragedy. But the clamor turned to quiet as this picture burned itself into their memories.
Reports from the flight dynamics officer indicate that the vehicle apparently exploded and that impact in the water.
Some people were covering their eyes, and some people were just watching the TV set with a blank look on their face.
It was really quite dramatic. At first, you know, everyone was really happy, all these smiles, and then suddenly you saw a lot of people crying in the halls, and it was really pretty sad.
Just moments before, Eileen O'Hara, Krista McAuliffe's good friend and classroom substitute, had shared this haunting sentiment with a local reporter.
Yeah, it's going to be hard to watch because I want her to be safe and I want her to have fun.
Now the public celebration had turned into private mourning and shock.
She was a part of us. She was part of a family. And just like if your sister or brother died, she'll be remembered. It was a hell, just a hell.
A special counselor will be brought to Concord High tomorrow to help students begin dealing with their loss. But perhaps Krista McAuliffe's own words echo the best advice.
To follow your instincts and go for your dreams, and I hope they achieve that.
Jay Shadler, ABC News, Concord, New Hampshire.
In classrooms around the country today, with someone from the classroom world lifting off, it was as if they all were.
What are you feeling right now? What are you feeling?
Goosebumps all over. Yeah.
James Rowley was a semi-finalist in NASA's Teacher in Space selection.
We have a report from the flight dynamics officer that the vehicle has exploded. Flight director confirms that. We are looking at checking with the recovery forces to see what can be done at this point.
Can we get the cameras?
Brought in for the new age's first formal classroom lessons from outer space, our children were suddenly taught instead the old lessons of mortality.
Judy Resnick, there it is. There you see that massive.
Of the real risk, which gives any victories their meaning.
Well, I was really amazed to see it because I never thought explosion would really ever happen.
I was pretty scared because I thought it could have been my science teacher that was going to be hurt in it.
A finalist in the teacher selection.
It's something that'll take a long time for people to get over, but I really feel that it's worth every effort to continue the space program.
Space shuttle explode, get it right now.
In the streets and stores across America today, that same feeling in the gut we had known before.
Well, I think it's very tragic. I think it's the most tragic thing since the death of Kennedy himself.
I got the same sick kind of feeling that I used to get when I was in Vietnam. Just a horrible feeling.
The feeling that you get, that cold feeling all over that only happens maybe 5 times in your lifetime.
We were all set up for it, watching this shuttle flight especially because this time the space age was really going to begin. One of us was going, not just a teacher, but a mother, a private citizen, your neighbor.
That's very upset. After all that about Krista McAuliffe, it's almost as if you know her.
When Challenger was 10 miles up and 18 miles down range and that explosion occurred, we all knew a great deal about Krista McAuliffe, but we've become so accustomed to the shuttle going up and coming down now that the other astronauts on board were just not as well known to us. Well, they are today, and ABC's Stone Phillips has been looking at them.
When they posed, it was like a portrait of America. Men and women, war veterans and first-time astronauts, parents, and even a classical pianist. Their commander was Francis Scobie, age 46, from Washington State, an astronaut after 22 years in the Air Force. This was his second shuttle mission. Second in command, pilot Michael Smith, age 40, a decorated Navy pilot from North Carolina. Like Scobie, he'd seen combat in Vietnam and trained as a test pilot. And like the commander, he was a husband and father. This was Smith's first shuttle mission. Mission specialist Ellison Onizuka was the first Hawaiian astronaut who believed in the benefits of the space program.
There are a lot of outcomes from these projects which will affect both our society and the rest of the world.
Onizuka is survived by his wife and 2 daughters. 36-year-old mission specialist Judy Resnick was a shuttle veteran, her assignment to operate the shuttle's mechanical arm. She was on board the shuttle Discovery in 1984 when a launch was aborted after the engines had fired. Gregory Jarvis was on board to conduct tests on the effects of weightlessness on liquids carried in tanks. Born in Detroit, trained as an Air Force satellite engineer, Jarvis was on his first shuttle mission. Ronald McNair, age 36, from South Carolina, brought a background in physics and laser technology to the shuttle program. This was the second trip to space for a husband and father who saw space travel as a calling for mankind.
I see it as something that we must do, and I see it as something that's part of man's nature to explore.
These 6, along with Krista McAuliffe, the first teacher in space, now a tragic page in NASA history. Stone Phillips, ABC News.
We now go to the White House and President Reagan.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'd planned to speak to you tonight to report on the State of the Union. But the events of earlier today have led me to change those plans. Today is a day for mourning and remembering. Nancy and I are pained to the core by the tragedy of the shuttle Challenger. We know we share this pain with all of the people of our country. This is truly a national loss. 19 years ago, almost to the day, we lost 3 astronauts in a terrible accident on the ground. But we've never lost an astronaut in flight. We've never had a tragedy like this. And perhaps we've forgotten the courage it took for the crew of the shuttle. But they, the Challenger 7, were aware of the dangers, but overcame them and did their jobs brilliantly. We mourn 7 heroes: Michael Smith, Dick Scobie, Judith Resnick, Ronald McNair, Ellison Onizuka, Gregory Jarvis, and Krista Mikaloff. We mourn their loss as a nation together. The families of the 7, we cannot bear, as you do, the full impact of this tragedy. But we feel the loss, and we're thinking about you so very much. Your loved ones were daring and brave, and they had that special grace, that special spirit that says, give me a challenge, and I'll meet it with joy. They had a hunger to explore the universe and discover its truths. They wished to serve, and they did. They served all of us. We've grown used to wonders in this century. It's hard to dazzle us. But for 25 years, the United States space program has been doing just that. We've grown used to the idea of space, and perhaps we forget that we've only just begun. We're still pioneers. They, the members of the Challenger crew, were pioneers. And I want to say something to the school children of America who were watching the live coverage of the shuttle's takeoff. I know it's hard to understand, but sometimes painful things like this happen. It's all part of the process of exploration and discovery. It's all part of taking a chance and expanding man's horizons. The future doesn't belong to the faint-hearted. It belongs to the brave. The Challenger crew was pulling us into the future, and we'll continue to follow them. I've always had great faith in and respect for our space program, and what happened today does nothing to diminish it. We don't hide our space program. We don't keep secrets and cover things up. We do it all up front and in public. That's the way freedom is, and we wouldn't change it for a minute. We'll continue our quest in space. There will be more shuttle flights and more shuttle crews, and yes, more volunteers, more civilians, more teachers in space. Nothing ends here. Our hopes and our journeys continue. I want to add that I wish I could talk to every man and woman who works for NASA or who worked on this mission and tell them your dedication and professionalism have moved and impressed us for decades, and we know of your anguish. We share it. There's a coincidence today. On this day, 390 years ago, the great explorer Sir Francis Drake died aboard ship off the coast of Panama. In his lifetime, the great frontiers were the oceans, and a historian later said he lived by the sea, died on it, and was buried in it. Well, today, we can say of the Challenger crew, their dedication was, like Drake's, complete. The crew of the Space Shuttle Challenger honored us for the manner in which they lived their lives. We will never forget them, nor the last time we saw them this morning, as they prepared for their journey and waved goodbye and slipped the surly bonds of earth to touch the face of God. Thank you.
They gathered in the open air, surrounded by the buildings that house the space program, for a simple, plain memorial service.
We're gathered here today as a family that shares a common dream, common goal, common commitment, and now a common tragic and devastating loss.
The President and Mrs. Reagan sat with the immediate family members of the lost crew, and behind them sat other relatives and friends, space agency officials and employees, members of Congress and other dignitaries, including Senator Edward Kennedy, whose brother, the President, gave the space program such a boost, and that President's children, John F. Kennedy Jr. and Caroline. They all heard Mr. Reagan strike a note of sadness and of perseverance.
We remember Ronald McNair, who said that he learned perseverance in the cotton fields of South Carolina. His dream was to live aboard the space station, performing experiments and playing his saxophone in the weightlessness of space. Well, Ron, we will miss your saxophone, and we will build your space station.
The most emotional moments of the ceremony came at the end, when the Reagans said goodbye to the family members. Final salute as T-38 trainers flew over in the missing man formation. The Challenger crew gone, but not forgotten.
As the nation grieves, the search for what went wrong begins. NASA examines the performance of the shuttle's three main components: the orbiter, where the astronauts live and work during their time in space; the huge orange fuel tank in the center. This aluminum skin tank burns liquid fuel through the ascent stage and is discarded after use. The solid rocket boosters, 2 of them, 1 on either side. These reusable tubes burn solid rocket fuel and supply the tremendous power needed to lift the spacecraft into orbit. From the start, speculation on the cause of the tragedy centers on the solid rocket boosters, or SRBs.
From ABC News, The Weekend Report, here's Britt Hume.
Good evening. NASA tonight released new photographs and videotape which appeared to confirm reports the space agency is focusing on one of the solid rocket boosters as the source of the trouble that led to the explosion of the shuttle Challenger. NASA officials, however, refused to speculate on the meaning of the pictures and said they have not determined the cause of the explosion. John Quinones has more from Cape Canaveral.
For 5 days now, NASA investigators have been painstakingly studying impounded photographs, videotapes, and all flight data from Challenger's 1 minute and 15-second ascent to disaster. Tonight, the investigating board released videotape and photographs, which clearly indicates the possibility of a fuel leak. NASA calls it a plume on one of the shuttle's solid rocket boosters.
The videotape and the still photo frames show an unusual plume on the right-hand SRB, which is under investigation.
Officials will not comment on the cause or the effect of the fuel leak, but sources close to their investigation have told ABC News' Jules Bergman that Challenger's explosion is believed to have been ignited by the rupture of a seam within the rocket booster on Challenger's right side. Flames shot directly at the shuttle's external fuel tank, sources say, and 9 seconds later, Challenger erupted in a massive fireball. NASA says investigators must examine thousands more pictures before they draw any conclusions.
President Reagan today shunted NASA aside in favor of an outside commission to investigate the Challenger disaster.
It's time now to assemble a group of distinguished Americans to take a hard look at the accident, to make a calm and deliberate assessment of the facts, and ways to avoid repetition.
The president said he wants a report within 120 days. William P. Rogers, Secretary of State in the Nixon administration, was named chairman of the commission. Neil Armstrong, former astronaut and first man on the moon, vice chairman. Other members, former test pilot Chuck Yeager, astronaut Sally Ride, Nobel physicist Richard Feynman, and Washington lawyer David Acheson.
Chairman William Rogers swore in his blue ribbon panel this morning, and they got right to work, taking testimony from top NASA officials, much of it a kind of primer on the space shuttle system. But they quickly discounted recent speculation that below freezing temperatures on launch day might have contributed to the accident.
We had no concern for performance or safety of the flight articles at that time, nor do I even at this time.
Although they admitted the solid rocket fuel is not meant to be used in temperatures below 40 degrees, they said the bulk mean temperature at launch time was well above that. And they said while there was some concern that rubber O-rings used to seal the rocket joints might be affected by the cold weather, shuttle managers and Morton Thiokol, who make the rocket boosters, were convinced there was no problem at a meeting the night before launch.
And the discussion centered around the integrity of the O-rings under lowered temperature. And Thiokol recommended to proceed in the launch.
The focus of today's commission meeting was seals, specifically the twin rubber O-rings designed to keep solid rocket fuel from leaking out of the metal casing. NASA officials admitted that examination of boosters retrieved from previous flights indicated some failures of the seal system at the field joint, the spot where two segments are joined and where the flame appeared that may have caused the shuttle explosion. There were 7 instances of hot gas jets searing through the putty lining and causing partial erosion of the primary O-ring. There were 2 instances of soot deposits behind the primary O-ring. And although NASA says a secondary seal was eroded only once on a different joint, they never observed the sort of complete burn-through that could have triggered Challenger's demise. In any event, they said their own testing had assured them the seals were still holding and they had plenty of margin for safety.
We could take 3 times what the maximum amount of erosion that we had observed, and thus we concluded that that was a acceptable situation.
That's not what NASA employee Richard Cook said in a memo to his boss last summer. He wrote of potential failure of the O-rings that could be catastrophic. Today, Cook testified that as a controller, he'd written the memo for budgetary reasons. But under intense questioning from Chairman William Rogers, he explained,
I wrote it because I felt that it was a serious enough situation that until these various issues were resolved with the SRBs, that they had to be taken care of before the shuttle could safely continue.
New pictures released by NASA appear to show there was a problem with the booster rocket almost immediately after ignition. Here's ABC's Lynn Scher.
The newest pictures released by NASA showing an unusual burst of dark smoke towards the base of the right solid rocket booster illustrate why the investigation has so far focused on the rocket as the source of the accident. The theory is the intense pressure of the rocket motor at its height 0.6 of a second after ignition broke through the seals of a rocket joint, starting the deadly chain of events. That's one of the issues examined by the Presidential Commission in 15 hours of investigation over 2 days here in Florida. Chairman William Rogers said the panel talked to officials of NASA and Morton Thiokol, the rocket manufacturer. And the group inspected the joint connecting 2 segments of the rocket booster. One commissioner, Nobelist Richard Feynman, said the O-ring failure, quote, looks like the most likely cause at this point.
For the first time tonight, there's an official indication that the decision to launch may have been at fault in the explosion of the shuttle Challenger. The Presidential Commission investigating the disaster says it has now looked into how that decision was made and found, quote, the process may have been flawed. Accordingly, Commission Chairman William Rogers has requested that no one associated with that process be involved in NASA's internal investigation.
The space shuttle's 2 solid rocket boosters are too big to make in one piece, and so they're made in sections. Where the sections are joined, it is impossible to get a tight, perfect seal between 2 huge pieces of metal, and so they put flexible seals called O-rings between the sections to fill in any cracks that may occur. A lot of evidence now suggests that one of these rings failed, melted perhaps, and allowed fires to shoot out sidewise through the crack. A commission appointed by President Reagan has been investigating this and other questions all week. Before we talk to our guests, some background on this from Jack Smith. Jack?
Commission, come to order, please.
David, it was the only show in town, if not in the country this week, and the President's Commission on the Shuttle disaster saw its best evidence yet of what may have occurred. Photographs of the shuttle showing a puff of black smoke from the suspect right booster rocket at the moment of launch itself.
We feel that that's a leak, may or may not be related to temperature, and we feel it's coming out of the most likely spot is the joint between the aft booster and the aft segment.
It's widely believed now that a seal gave way in a joint in one of the rocket boosters and that this caused the plume of white-hot exhaust gas later in flight, which apparently touched off the explosion that destroyed Challenger and its crew of 7. It was originally seen exclusively as a case of equipment failure, but this week's hearings revealed a failure in human communications as well. NASA, it turns out, knew for years the seals were flawed, and the night before launch, warnings the shuttle could explode were disregarded. Monday, January 27th, a scheduled launch is aborted because of bad weather. The temperature turns cold, so cold that night foot-long icicles begin forming on the pad. Engineers at Morton Thiokol, which manufactures the boosters, call a teleconference and unanimously recommend against launch the next day.
I made the direct statement that if anything happened to this launch, told them I sure wouldn't want to be the person that had to stand in front of a board of inquiry to explain why I launched this outside of the qualification of the solid rocket motor.
There was never one positive pro-launch statement ever made by anybody.
On previous flights, Thiokol engineers had noticed that in cold weather, the 2 rubber O-rings used to seal the booster's joints tended to fail.
With launch temperatures predicted in the 30s, 20 degrees colder than ever experienced, they feared a leak and an explosion. But NASA managers in the East strongly objected, and after a heated debate lasting much of the evening, Thiokol management in Utah overruled its engineers, and Thiokol Vice President Joe Kilminster sent NASA the authorization to launch. As for NASA, it denied using pressure, but the commission was still baffled.
Did any of you gentlemen, prior to launch, know about the objections of Thiokol to the launch?
I did not.
Senior NASA officials were never told.
Mr. Reinhardt, are you telling us that you, in fact, are the person who made the decision not to escalate this to a level 2 item?
That's correct, sir.
If this were an airplane, an airliner, and I just had a 2-hour argument with Boeing on whether the wing was going to fall off or not, I think I'd tell the pilot, at least mention it.
I had none of the knowledge of any dissension that was going on within the internal discussion at Thiokol. None of that was available.
The hearings revealed that problems with the O-ring seals should have been well known. As recently as last July, engineers at Thiokol had written warnings to their superiors.
We stand in jeopardy of losing a flight along with all the launch pad facilities.
Now, was any warning or flavor of that very serious letter transmitted to anyone at NASA, to your knowledge?
No, sir, not that letter.
I had never considered the seals as a threat to flight safety because I thought adequate margin was available.
Yet NASA itself, in this report 3 years ago, concluded the seals were weak and could cause loss of mission, vehicle, and crew. The commission also learned that a second contractor had objected to launch. Icing on the pad was so severe that Rockwell, which makes the orbiter, feared damage to the shuttle from debris during ignition. But this is what happened to Rockwell's views as they were passed down the line.
I then called my 2 program managers who were in Florida at 5:45, and they said, we cannot recommend launching from here.
I said that Rockwell could not assure the safety of flight.
My interpretation of the input that was made to me in the mission management team meeting that I described is that a concern was voiced, and it was not an objection to launch.
Does everybody know what everybody else is recommending? Does everybody have the facts?
Clearly not. But since NASA's own ICE team later cleared the launch, it was a moot point. However, it was more evidence that something was wrong.
You'll remember that I did say at one point that we thought the decision-making process may be flawed. I believe I'm speaking for the whole commission when I say that we think it is flawed.
But as the commission members adjourned for the week, the NASA managers whose testimony had so disturbed them seemed wholly unrepentant.
I'm not sure what Mr. Rogers means in terms of the decision process being flawed. I do not believe that the decision process that I know and understand to be flawed.
I know that the decisions that I made based on the data that we had up to January the 27th and through the launch count up until the liftoff occurred on January 28th, that all the actions were proper.
We thought that the problem was acceptable and did not endanger the safety of flight.
For the first time today, the only shuttle astronaut on the Presidential Investigating Commission has given an interview on the effects of the disaster. America's first woman in space, Dr. Sally Ride, talked to ABC's Lynn Sher.
She has been one of the most active members of the Presidential Commission. But today, Sally Ride spoke out for the first time on her personal reaction to the accident that has halted space flight.
I am not ready to fly again now. I think that there are very few astronauts who are ready to fly again now. I think we all believe that it's important for NASA to, number one, understand the problem and dedicate themselves to fixing the problem, and also to just assess other areas of the program and areas within NASA to make sure that there aren't other accidents lurking in the background.
Dr. Ride, a 34-year-old physicist, flew on 2 shuttle flights, both on Challenger.
I pictured the feeling of excitement that I'd had during that launch, and then picturing the accident and focusing back on the accident. When I realized how fast it happened, I guess it sort of hit home to me that during a launch, that's not what you're thinking about.
She said she dealt with the potential danger of space travel a year or so before she first went up by weighing the risks and making her decision. By contrast, she said private citizens who have flown on the shuttle, including schoolteacher Krista McAuliffe, may not have had the same opportunity to understand the risks.
I think that we may have been misleading people into thinking that this is a routine operation, that it's just like getting on an airliner and going across the country, and that it's that safe. And it's not.
Dr. Ride wouldn't discuss the investigation itself, but she admitted that last week's revelations about the flawed decision-making process and the lack of rocket testing affected her.
I was disturbed, I think is a good way to put it.
NASA officials announced late today that the crew compartment of the ill-fated Space Shuttle Challenger has been located on the ocean bottom off the Florida coast. Astronaut remains are inside the compartment. Lynn Scher has details on this development.
Divers from the USS Preserver tentatively identified the crew compartment in 100 feet of water on Friday afternoon. And after family members were notified, the Preserver returned to the site yesterday. A number of subsequent dives confirmed the existence of the crew compartment debris and crew remains. It's all there, one source told ABC News. This was the scene aboard the USS Preserver as it came into port last night. Navy men in dress blues standing guard over a flag-draped container with some of the remains of Challenger's 7 crew members. The ship arrived with no lights and no fanfare after almost a day and a half at sea. Ambulances from nearby Patrick Air Force Base were standing by to transport the contents to a NASA laboratory for identification and analysis. The examinations will be carried out at Cape Canaveral Air Force Station by pathologists from the Armed Forces.
A federal investigator today confirmed that the crew compartment of the shuttle Challenger survived, relatively intact until it hit the ocean. At the Kennedy Space Center in Florida, the investigating team has laid out along a grid the 12 to 14% of Challenger which has been pulled from the ocean floor. And today reporters saw it. Here's ABC's Lynn Scher.
The immense explosion that appeared to consume the shuttle within seconds actually left at least part of it free of burns. And investigators now believe that the front part of the orbiter itself, shown here emerging from the cloud, broke free at the moment of the catastrophe. That means Challenger's crew cabin, with 7 astronauts strapped into their seats, likely was intact as it fell to the sea.
There is evidence that in this outer shell, the damage that we see would indicate that we had some mass within this outer shell when it struck the water. It didn't float down slowly.
And it was not the explosion, but a combination of aerodynamic stress and water impact that finally broke it apart.
The optics were deceiving in some regard because it appeared to all of us initially that there was a huge explosion and everything came down in tiny fragments.
NASA won't speculate whether the astronauts were alive when their cabin hit the water. But the scenario is the result of 10 weeks of analysis of shuttle debris. The National Transportation Safety Board member on loan to NASA for the analysis pointed out that the entire structure was remarkably free of burning or what he called toasting.
We see more evidence of aerodynamic breakup than we do of any blast effect.
He also said while the nose cone of the left solid rocket was intact, that of the right was damaged, solid evidence that the damaged right booster crashed into the external tank.
The remains of the 7 shuttle astronauts are now at Dover Air Force Base in Delaware. As Lark McCarthy reports, they were flown there yesterday from Cape Canaveral.
The long journey of the Challenger crew is almost over. A silent ceremony at Dover Air Force Base echoed with grief and honor for the fallen 7. The remains of Commander Dick Scobie were escorted off first, followed by those of pilot Michael Smith. Smith and Scobie will be buried next month at Arlington National Cemetery. Then came the caskets of the mission specialists, bound for their home states. Ellison Onizuka will be buried in Hawaii, Judith Resnick in Ohio, and Ronald McNair will be laid to rest in South Carolina. The remains of engineer Gregory Jarvis will be cremated and his ashes scattered at sea off the coast of California. The coffin bearing Krista McAuliffe, the New Hampshire school teacher, came last. Funeral plans are being kept private. In a tribute to the 7, a sign read, "Challenger crew, we bid you farewell."
As the Challenger investigation continues, key personnel changes are made at NASA.
The top managers who disregarded expert objections and decided to launch the shuttle leave NASA or are reassigned. At Morton Thiokol, the 4 vice presidents who failed to heed their engineers' warnings retire or are reassigned. The Rogers Commission report, released in June 1986, identifies the failure of the solid rocket booster seals, the O-rings, as the primary cause of the Challenger disaster. NASA's decision-making process is cited as a contributing factor. NASA is ordered to make sweeping technical and organizational changes before the shuttle can fly again. America's space program is at a standstill for 2 years, while NASA completely redesigns and rebuilds the shuttle fleet. Finally, the Space Shuttle Discovery is scheduled to fly in September of 1988. Discovery is to be the crucial test of America's ability to return to space.
From ABC News, The Weekend Report, here's Tom Gerald.
Good evening. The Space Shuttle program, grounded for a year and a half after the fatal mishap involving the Challenger crew, roared back to life today, at least on the test pad. After a couple of earlier aborted attempts, a redesigned Space Shuttle booster rocket was successfully test-fired for the first time. It rekindled hopes that the shuttle missions might be resumed as early as next June, as Sylvan Rodriguez reports.
3, 2, 1.
Intensely bright flames lit up the Utah hillside for 2 minutes and developed the kind of pressure experienced during an actual launch. The key test involves the redesigned joints, which now have 3 O-rings instead of 2, and an added metal lip to prevent gas from leaking. After the test firing, which developed 2.8 million pounds of thrust, engineers were pleased with initial results.
To get to the day when we have the first full-scale, full-duration, full-thrust test of the flight motor, and to get that behind us and let us keep climbing this mountain of work that we have to do is a day for a couple of grins, and so bear with us.
The redesign is 3 for 3. We had 2 good tests earlier in the month, and from all external indications, this one is the same way.
Engineers did spot a small problem with the water system designed to cool the motor after the test firing. That resulted in some burned insulation. It will take engineers a month to analyze all the data, but for now they are confident this country's space program is on the right track for returning to space safely. Sylvan Rodriguez, ABC News, Brigham City, Utah.
One of the shuttle astronauts today declared, "This is what I call a happy 4th of July." What made it special was the rollout of the shuttle Discovery to its launching pad. The space agency insists it was just a coincidence that it happened today, but it made for a very happy and emotional holiday at the Cape. Bettina Gregory was there.
NASA hopes today was the dawn of a new era for the space program. Discovery approaching the launch pad on its huge diesel-powered tractor, the end of a 4-mile journey to the launch pad that took 6 hours to complete. But it's taken NASA 2.5 years to roll out the first shuttle since the Challenger explosion. Thousands of NASA workers and their families drove by, waving, snapping photos, and elated at this milestone.
Great! Love it!
The shuttle rolled out of the vehicle assembly building 50 minutes late. Astronaut David Hilmers took it philosophically.
You know, we've waited so long, I guess, that maybe the 45-minute or so delay that we had was maybe somewhat appropriate.
But NASA workers packing grandstands at the ceremony didn't seem to care.
Well, I'd be out here at 3 o'clock in the morning if that's when it was going to happen.
15,000 workers here at the Cape signed a book which the crew will carry into space aboard Discovery. Hilmers accepted it on their behalf.
The mark of a great nation, of its greatness, that it can rise again from adversity. And with Discovery, rise again we shall.
When Discovery finally lifts off, it will fly what NASA calls a conservative mission. The trip will be brief and limited. 4 days to launch a communication satellite, like the one destroyed in the Challenger explosion. But it is not business as usual. Among more than 400 changes, a new escape system. If 2 engines fail, astronauts can blow a side hatch, slide down a pole, then float to sea by parachute. That replaces what was euphemistically called a water landing, which no one ever believed astronauts would survive. And while the new escape system wouldn't have saved the Challenger astronauts, it is welcomed by the Discovery crew.
This escape system that we have
albeit limited in capability, would be our only hope to survive.
Survival is very much on their minds, and they've memorialized their Challenger colleagues with 7 stars on their mission patch. Commander Rick Houck underscored the importance of this mission.
We clearly could not afford to lose another vehicle, much less another crew.
When Columbia flew on its maiden shuttle voyage, NASA hoped simply that it would go up and come down. 7 years and 25 missions later, that is exactly what they want for Discovery. Lynn Scher, ABC News, at the Johnson Space Center, Houston.
President Reagan today, with only 4 months left in his presidency, has tried to give the U.S. space program a major boost. 1 week before the shuttle Discovery is scheduled to lift off, the president went to mission control in Houston. ABC's Sheila Cast was with him.
On landing in Houston, the president deflected the question, would he like to go up in space, with a quip.
I've been there for several years.
But at the Johnson Space Flight Center, Mr. Reagan was not joking. Many hopes are pinned on these 5 astronauts who showed the president around a mock-up of the Discovery shuttle they're scheduled to take into space a week from today. The last time Mr. Reagan was here was 2.5 years ago, when he comforted the relatives of the astronauts killed in the Challenger disaster. 2 of those families, along with the Discovery crew's relatives, were back today, as the president remembered.
When the Discovery takes off, 7 precious souls will soar beside it, the 7 heroes of the Challenger.
The president did not focus on the tough budget choices among space projects which his successor will face. Instead, he listed many technological goals, including a space-orbiting airplane and a manned space station within the next 10 years.
It is mankind's manifest destiny to bring our humanity into space, to colonize this galaxy, and as a nation, we have the power to determine whether America will lead or will follow. I say that America must lead.
The president told the employees they launched not only rockets, but dreams. His aim here was to add momentum to that dream. Sheila Cast, ABC News at the Johnson Space Flight Center.
T-minus 15, 14, 13, 12, 11, 10. We're go for main engine start. 7, 6. We have main engine start. 3, 2, 1, 0. And liftoff. Liftoff. Americans return to space as Discovery clears the tower.
Roger, roll, Discovery. Cruise control program, Houston now controlling.
Go, baby.
3 engines at 104%.
Wow.
Go. 3 good APUs, 3 good fuel cells. Standing by to begin. Throttle down to 65%. Engines throttling down now to maintain a certain speed as the spacecraft passes through max Q. Three engines at 65% now. Standing by to see engines begin to throttle back up at about 59 seconds. Mark 1 minute, velocity 2,300 feet per second, altitude 5.9 nautical miles, downrange distance 3 nautical miles.
Yeah, we say it before, but the anchor booth at Kennedy Space Center
Discovery,
shakes. They're
go and
in
throttle
maximum
up.
speed already.
We're through that problem area with the wind. And the next
Discovery giving a go at throttle up, 3 engines at 104%, velocity 3,200 feet per second, altitude 10.8 nautical miles, downrange distance 8 nautical miles.
In a little over 2 minutes, those solid rocket boosters ought to have done their job, and that's been one of the key focal points on this mission.
Glorious day. Those are the long-range tracking cameras.
25 seconds from solid rocket booster separation.
25 seconds. Those outboard rockets will fall off having done their job.
1 minute 45 seconds, 3 engines at 104%.
We've never had better pictures.
Major milestone coming up.
Velocity 4,800 feet per second, altitude 20 nautical miles, downrange distance 19 nautical miles. Standing by for solid rocket booster separation.
There it is. Separate, baby.
There they go. Get it.
Oh, she's on the tank. She's over pushing 4,000 miles an hour right now, and that was a key point.
Solid rocket boosters
Get rid of those solid rocket boosters which caused Challenger's disaster.
Someone did their job right.
3 engines still.
The launch had a special meaning for some school children in Port St. John, Florida. And ABC's John Quinones went to see them.
The children of Challenger 7 Elementary had been anxiously waiting for this day ever since the Challenger explosion. Many of these kids were eyewitnesses to that tragedy.
I just fell apart when it blew up.
But the children were convinced that today's launch of Discovery would be different.
What do you want for the space shuttle today?
I want to go.
The kids spent hours painting posters, building shuttle models, and writing down in words sentiments of the heart.
Dear NASA, hope this launch is a good one, and I hope no one gets hurt going up. I know the Challenger was a giant disaster for the space program. I want to wish the astronauts a good trip.
I'm sure everyone here is proud of you because you are very special, all of you.
By launch time, the children, now nervous with anticipation, gathered outside their school in the shadow of the Kennedy Space Center.
3, 2, 1,
As Discovery painted a picture-perfect liftoff, the children of Challenger Elementary formed one huge pep rally.
I knew it'd make it. I didn't have no doubt about it.
It's made it, guys!
It made it!
John Quinones, ABC News, Port St. John, Florida.
Gear down. The gear down and launch the report from Mission Control. Main gear touchdown. Commander out now rotating the nose down, standing by for nose gear and touchdown.
Don't come any better.
Like a baby.
Now, one of the problems they had in earlier landings was flying the brakes on. Everything looks just to have been smooth as silk here. In the distance, the national anthem.
Stop.
Roger, we'll stop Discovery. Welcome back. Great ending.